finally fixed the Coda. It was quite a bit more broken than I thought it was, and I mean physically broken. But then I fixed it. And to repay me, it immediately broke again. This is the future. To find out what I'm talking about, let's go to the past. The last time I worked on this thing, I tried to fix as many of the broken bits around the car as I could. And I got most of them fixed, but then somehow managed to break all but 2 of the mounts that hold the gearbox and motor in place. So now I gotta fix those, which means dropping the motor and the gearbox out of the car. And I'm not looking forward to it. For safety, I need to isolate this car from high voltage, which means undoing this high voltage clamp. And you'll notice that it's being held down to the front power distribution box with a zip tie. I'm to blame for that, because this piece of crap plastic broke. Because I broke it. I'm trying to blame the car for things that are really my fault. Before I can think about dropping the motor, I have to disconnect it from the inverter, this whole box right here. And it's connected to the inverter via this ground cable, this signal harness here, and these big 3-phase high voltage cables here that go into this box. And there we go, 3-phase connections ready to be unbolted. Quick overview, high voltage comes from the battery pack through this connector here into the front power distribution box. Then it goes to the PTC, it's actually labeled on this one. It goes to the PTC heater, that's just the resistive water heater. Goes to the AC compressor, and this goes to the inverter right here. And it goes into the inverter and the pixies get danced around and get converted into 3-phase AC and come out here to the motor. This is where I need to disconnect. Here's something I'm not looking forward to. All of it! But more specifically, I have to disconnect the coolant lines that are on the top of the motor right underneath the inverter. So I'm probably going to get a little wet from coolant in this process. Almost! There we go! There's one. It's fine. I got the coolant hoses off! First I'm aware this is the last thing to disconnect. The harness going to the parking lock actuator on the gearbox. Shouldn't be anything else left. Unless there's a speed sensor on the gearbox, but that'd be silly since they can just use the speed of the motor to calculate speed. I got a couple rubber stoppers to cap off the coolant lines going into the motor so the coolant won't spill out of them. And now I'm going to drain the gearbox so I have as little mess as possible. And for my next trick, I'm going to use a laminated stack of Baltic birch. As a motor support, I discovered a top motor mount. Oh my god, it wasn't just 3 bolts. This thing was actually being held in place by a motor mount on the other side. Please don't fall. There we go! I wasn't prepared for what I found in here. First of all, the good news, if you can call it that, it's more like benign news. I was wrong. At the beginning I said that this whole unit was being held in by 1 bolt, right over here on the gearbox side. And that wasn't true because there was a whole other mount on the motor side over here that I couldn't see. So it was being held in by 3 bolts. Now that's where the benign news ends. Let me bring you in for a closer look for the bad news. Say hello to the BorgWarner e-gear drive single-speed gear reduction box. This is the parking lock actuator. This is the 1 bolt that was holding it in place on the gearbox side. The hole's pretty chewed up, but it was still holding. This didn't hold. This didn't hold. This created a window in the gearbox and this just broke off. I'm gonna have to try to figure out some way to fix those, but it looks like cast aluminum, so that might be difficult. Now for the other side, say hello to the UQM Power Phase 100 permanent magnet electric motor. This is the motor mount that I didn't see when it was in the car. This is connected to a big old rubbery motor mount that sits right next to the shock tower. But on the other side, this tube mounted to the top of the motor ends in what looks like a fracture line. Because it is. That's the other side of that broken mount bar. This tube goes over to this arm right here, which is where the gearbox mounts in place. This is all on a rubber assembly. It attaches right here with this bushing, and a bushing right over there on the other side of the car, and that sits on this subframe cross brace. All of those pieces make up the motor and gearbox mount. How this broke, I'll never know. My guess is that these gearbox side mount bolts were loose, like they were when I found them, which caused the gearbox side of this whole brace assembly to flex independently from the motor, which caused stress in this area right here, and eventually this broke. And once this broke, these gearbox mounts were on their own. They don't have enough strength on their own, so they broke off. There we go. Here's how the motor mount assembly is supposed to be assembled. It's broken right here. Luckily, there were actually 2 mounting points on the side of this gearbox that are still intact. One of them just didn't have a bolt in it. There are the other 2 that are broken off, but I still have 2 good ones. This will be easy enough to repair. This is just steel. I can weld it back together. I'll grind a little bit of clearance back in there so I can get a good fillet between the 2, and then I'll add bracing. This, however, this repair is going to be a little more tricky. And by that I mean a lot more tricky, so I'll come back to that later. First, let's tackle this. I'm going to weld these brace plates on here. It's probably overkill, but that's the best kind of kill. Good news, I figured out how to fix these gearbox mounts. This is cast aluminum, so I couldn't weld to it, so I just epoxied the mount back into place. That should hold. Yes, obviously I'm joking. The only reason I epoxied that back in place at all is to plug the window in the gearbox. What I'm actually going to do about the gearbox mounts is this. Fouls on the gearbox right about here, so I'm going to weld on some spacers here in the form of these washers that I've ground the zinc off of. Before I continue on this, I should make sure the CV shaft clears, and oh yeah, that's nowhere near it. No worries there. Hi, I'm an idiot. Did you notice what I did wrong here? I went to remove this whole motor brace assembly to take it off and finish welding this extension arm on the bench, which is when I found out I put that extension arm on and captured it in place so I can no longer remove this brace. Now, if I would have realized that this was a problem beforehand, I would have bolted on this extension arm instead of welding it. But I didn't realize it, so instead of bolting it on, I welded it. I have 2 options. Option A is to cut off this extension arm and reattach it with bolts. Option B is to just continue forward, weld this in place, and accept the fact that this brace assembly is never coming off without a cutoff wheel and a grinder. Let me get back to you on that one. I fixed my mistake, and it only took me an entire extra day. I should have just left it as one solid welded piece instead of making it a bolt-on, bolt-off part. For one, it's uglier now, and also, it's weaker. Should have just left it as one welded piece. Because you know what this unit doesn't need? Service. And truthfully, this brace isn't doing much. It's adding push and pull support against this piece, but there's way too much leverage over here for it to have any other strength in any other direction. Unless I braced it with a triangle over here, but I don't have enough room over the gearbox, and that seemed like a lot of extra work for no real added benefit. I added this brace almost entirely for peace of mind, because if these 2 mount points break, well, then I have nothing on the gearbox side to bolt to, and for those to break, anyway, this would have to break in half again. The event that this is helpful is very unlikely, but again, I added it for peace of mind. So let's put this back in the car, which is a process I'm not excited about, but I'm going to sound excited. It's in! I got it in! And look! It doesn't flop all over the place like it used to. The car's moving on the lift, though. That's disconcerting. It was quite difficult to get in there. I had to take a break in the middle because I had to do it twice. I got it all the way offered up and this close to the mounting bolts, and then the bottom of the cart fouled on the bottom of the car. So I had to take it all out again and then stack up the motor on and the gearbox on some higher foam blocks on the cart so that the bottom of the cart wouldn't foul here. Then I got it in place. Then I got the coolant hoses reattached. I got all the cables stuffed up in there. I haven't connected them yet. It's all ready to go. Now, I know I already said this, but the coolant hose routing over here, because of this car's past life, is all a nightmare. I'm really curious. I'd like to see the bottom of a stock Coda to see how all of this is supposed to go together, because this ain't it. That coolant pump is not supposed to be flopping there, but I don't know where it mounts to properly. Good zip tie. Holding in that high voltage like a like a true zip tie. And that's it. I'm not done yet. There's no CV shafts in it and no gearbox oil. And those are important things. I just went back and rewatched the last video I made with this car, and I remember when I put that video out, there were a lot of commenters saying, it sounds like you swapped the CV shafts side to side. Having just watched the video, I can see why you would think that, but actually no. It had 2 left side CV shafts in it. Anyway, I'm tired of messing with CV shafts, so I ordered a brand new newish set of CV axles from Thunderstruck Motors, the only place I can still buy Coda parts, whose name isn't Carl. And one of these is 5 millimeters shorter than the other, and the shorter one goes on the right side. And I know that this time. There we go. Got it in. Now on this side. In every video where I touch these axle nuts, I get people telling me, you need to set those to the proper torque spec. Those are tapered wheel bearings. They need to be set at the right torque spec. I don't know what the right torque spec is, so I've picked a random number on my torque wrench, and I'm going to set a torque spec. There we go. Look, it's set now. Doesn't matter. The car doesn't stay operational long enough for this to be a problem anyway. Look! Look! Drive components on either side. Oh! It's been so long without them. Now to pump the gearbox full of lube. I think that's it. Now, do it still turn on? I don't know why it wouldn't, but gotta try it instead of assuming. No. See that little number there? I've had this 12-volt battery in the trunk sitting on a charger for over a week. That means it's dead. All right, I've jumped it with a 12-volt battery just to get it going, and it's not happy. Down there in the corner, I got a coolant warning and a red vehicle fault. It has the ready light on, but if I put it in the gear, she don't move. What is that? Why is it making that sound? Oh, I know what happened. Did you hear that buzzing sound the motor was making when I put it in reverse? My professional opinion is there's something wrong with it. But I actually know what it is this time. The 3-phase leads going to the motor that bolt onto the top of the inverter here. When I took them off, I forgot to mark which one goes where, but thankfully they're on this rubber grommet, so I only have 2 options. And clearly when I reinstalled it, I put it upside down, so I just need to flip her over, bolt everything back down, rebolt all of the rest of this, and then it should be good. Went out and bought myself a new 12-volt battery, so let's plug that in here. All right, let's see if it moves. I won't lie, I'm anxious. Ugh. On. Start it. Radio light is on. Let's put it in reverse. And yes! Oh! It moves! The vehicle fault light is still red and on, but it moves, so I'm going to take it for a test drive. Car's a lot slower than I remember, but there's no vibration! There's no vibration! Oh my god! Yes! Oh, and all of the improvements that I made in the last episode, like adding a speedometer that works, and the rear windows, and the other stuff that I don't remember. Oh, yeah, the rear wheel bearing isn't making a noise. I'm reaping the benefits of it now several months later. I've got my Coda back! And as weird as it is to say, with how crappy this car is, I missed it! I missed this car! Alright, a small issue has just popped up. The lightning bolt has come on, which indicates the battery voltage is low and it has reduced power. And I'm at 85% state of charge. I think this battery may be reaching the end of its life. It's alive! It's not perfect. The battery appears to be in low health, but I'm going to give it an overnight charge, and it's got a bunch of trouble codes that are old. I'll have to try to figure out how to clear those, but I can drive it around to places like wherever I am. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. I've got my Coda back. Update. I should have listened to the lightning bolt. It died at 70%. I'm guessing the BMS is a little confused right now.